the 2015 OEM power steering pump. We'll take these bolts off. All right, so there were a couple of guide pins there. They go right in those holes. You can see them right there. So there's the back cover. Wow. Let's just clean out some of that oil. There's an O-ring. You can see an O-ring that goes all the way around it. Okay, now watch how this works. Notice those flat fins? Now we get to that one right there and it doesn't flow. Let's see if we got these incorrect. Okay, see how it slides down? So each one of those little fins extends. So you can see the fins come down where they would pick up the fluid and build pressure. However, there's one of them for sure that does not drop down. That one right there seems to hang up a little bit. The rest seem to just flow nicely, but that could be a potential problem. Okay, this next piece just came out. It's got 2 holes in it. It just sits in there. That's what holds that in shape, in place. Then obviously this goes on top of that. So now another look at this. There's some movement, but then something stops it from coming out. So here's a look at the little fins that are in that round part. They all came out nice and easy, except for 2 of them. 2 of them seem to be bound up. That could have been the problem, because they seem to have to just flow by gravity as this thing spins. They slide out part way, grabbing some of the power steering fluid and, of course, building up pressure, like a paddle wheel almost. But 2 of them seem to hang up and don't come out. So that could be the problem that caused this thing to fail and not build up pressure. I'm going to put some pliers on it and see how hard they are in there. Okay, the last 2 fins, right here and here, they were 180 degrees opposite of each other and were physically hard to remove with a pair of needle nose pliers. So that means they were just kind of staying in 180 degrees opposite each other, staying in position uptight and not dropping down to grab the fluid and move it. So unless I find something else that seems to be like a component failure, I think it was 2 of these fins right here. I can see wear marks on it, but they were just really hard to pull out. I almost thought there was something different about them, but there's not. Looks like there's 10 of them in total. Okay, so now you can see all the empty slots where those fins went. This collar right here doesn't seem to pull off. There is a metal clip on here, but it doesn't have any like holes to use a pair of pliers on. And you can see that just kind of stops it. And then you can also see that it's splined, but it's being stopped right now from coming out. And you can just barely see a little gap right there on that metal clip. All right, so old school press, big ass bolt, got the pulley off. There's the pulley. It was pulled off with an old school press. It was basically pressed off. Now you can see that this shaft right here, the only thing keeping that in is that metal clip. It's like a tiny little wire ring right there. I don't know if there's a trick to get that off or if it has to be pressed out and it compresses and then expands, but that's really all that's holding it in. And then I would have completely, there is another piece behind here too that I haven't, you can see in the background, there's another piece in there too. So there's still a few more components in there. Pretty ingenious invention, really. Once again, the arbor press was the key, so I was able to put the pump right in here like that, and what it did is it pressed that metal ring right through the rotor. So we'll go back to the shop and look at this carefully. Amazing what goes into this thing. So much. Special markings for orientation. Quite a lot of pieces. I'm sure it can be rebuilt, but I would say you really need to know what the hell you're doing. There's the shaft right here. It got pressed through. Then this piece was sitting in the bottom just like this. Obviously this thing sat up on top with those markings like that. But this is very interesting. I see some wear marks there. They look like they're wear marks. I don't know if that's normal or not, if this thing started to crack. Definitely that's the first thing I've seen that doesn't look right. Okay, on the high pressure side, you can see I'm just going to unthread that. It's got spring tension on it. It's got a couple O-rings, and this must be the valve regulator. I'll put the phone down and see if I can use two hands and see if that comes out or if it has a snap ring in there. Okay. I think this is the pressure regulator. Interesting. It's got some holes in it. You can see a little screen. Let me zoom in there. See a screen at the back. Somewhere in there, there's a, I don't know, it seemed like it had spring tension on it. Let me revisit that. Maybe it was just pressure. Okay. Thought there was spring tension on it. Wow. Obviously that hole right there is the high side. As that rotor spins around and those fins build up pressure, goes into there. And that's the high pressure side that would go to the steering box. Really remarkable. Cannot believe the parts. That just doesn't look right to me. A couple gaskets in there, a large one, a small one. Let's see what else we have. Obviously the bearing is inside there. That cover right there is the bearing. One end is square.
Several years ago, the YouTube channel Llama Paranormal began documenting strange activities inside of their 100-year-old house.
One end has a taper on it, so it has to go in the right way.
The channel based
And then you can see a score mark. See the score mark right there?
they claim to be real poltergeist
Right there's the score mark,
initially
where it slides back and forth. Pretty wild. So they actually, all 10 of them have to actually go in the proper way. The first sign that we thought something was wrong on the rocks, where we heard a squealing sound, as if the belt, the power steering belt was the problem. And obviously, if the shaft stopped turning, even just for a few seconds, with the motor driving the belt, it would squeal like that. So this is with the shaft out of the power steering pump. It looks to me like a damaged piece of metal, and you can see some scoring in there. So at some point, something seized up, perhaps the bearing that's pressed in there. And then after that, we had some intermittent power steering, enough to get me pretty close to the cowboy camp. Then full power steering pump failure. Goes like that. That piece goes in. piece goes in. Then that piece goes in. That's got to go in a little further, but you get the idea. Okay, just press that in flush. So when I used the arbor press, there was a metal ring. I pressed it from the top out, that shaft right there, and that metal ring went flying. But it was the only way. It was a snap ring without any snaps, without any openings for snap ring pliers. So this is going to be kind of like just for instructional purposes now. But we've got the cover, those two guides right there, that gasket. Then pretty much went through this thing, and I think it was primarily a bearing problem. Although I will say, it seemed like two of the fins right here do not slide well at all. Obviously, as this thing spins at high RPM, these little slides come out, and they take the low pressure oil that comes in, and then as this continues to turn, it builds pressure. It takes the oil and builds pressure. Then it goes up through here to that valve that's inside of here, and then out the high pressure end. It's amazing the engineering that went into this. There's all kinds of markings. You got to really pay attention, I guess, to how you take it apart if you're going to rebuild it and put it back together. Pretty impressive. A lot more than I expected.